A vision becomes a milestone when it helps make a cleaner, smarter, and a more beautiful planet. So that you can set off on joyous new journeys and adventures. Building stronger bonds and bridging impossible distances, which take you from the ever new to the forever beautiful. Opening up vistas and windows to a vibrant new world. A vision becomes a milestone when it touches millions of lives. Aditya Birla Group. Big in your life.
Thank you, Sonal.
Thank you, Sonal. Thank you, Sonal.
Why is everyone thanking me?
I'll tell you. When you buy an Usha sewing machine, more than 1% of the proceeds go towards empowering women in rural India through Usha Salai schools. That's why.
You have 10 minutes or I'm gone.
I'll take a lot less.
Send in the drones.
Show maps.
It seems like everybody wants you.
And Born Magnetic. The all-new i20. Born Magnetic.
Life is about to change, eh? No more 8 घंटे की नींद, no more late night movies, no more parties with friends.
बिल्कुल सही कहा तुमने. इसके फ्यूचर के लिए अब no more holidays, no more shopping और no more फिजूल का खर्च.
लेकिन अगर इसका फ्यूचर ऑलरेडी सिक्योर्ड हो तो?
Really?
डैडी बने हो, देवदास नहीं. जीना छोड़ दूंगा, हॉलीडेज छोड़ दूंगा.
स्मार्ट लोगों की क्लियर है प्रायोरिटी, बाकी सब बाद में. क्यूट वाले मेहमान से पहले LIC.
Luxury. In India, I discovered that true luxury isn't something you buy off a shelf. True luxury is a feeling that you are the Maharani of your world, and it can be all designed around you. All the beauty is yours. All the music is yours. India showed me that luxury doesn't follow designers and brands. True luxury follows its own heart.
Incredible India.
It's a human thing to want the truth. It doesn't matter if you're older or part of the youth. We certainly don't like being kept in the dark between all those lies and those question marks. But lately, it doesn't seem to bother us when they bend and break and twist and crush. The truth, that's supposed to matter so much. In the race to be the first who breaks the news, they seem to have broken the news. And do you even remember the time when the news was supposed to make you wise? And now you can spend hours consuming and listening them shouting and complaining. And in the end, just feeling worse off than you did in the beginning. Which begs the question, does all of this not trouble our generation? When they push opinions and call them facts as we watch the fourth pillar crumble and collapse. It is a human thing to want the truth and to make every claim carry its burden of proof. To expect that the first voice you hear is also the last word that's there.
Meet the all-new Hindustan Times. Now experience, engage and express. Hindustan Times. First voice, last word.
and welcome to this unique 18th edition of the Hindustan Times Leadership Summit, which for the first time in its history is being held virtually. I say unique because, of course, instead of physically coming together for 2 days of stimulating sessions, the 18th edition of the summit is virtual. It comes at a point where we seem within striking distance of a solution to the pandemic, the vaccine that may end the cycle of disease and death that COVID-19 has unleashed. As we all know, the world will never be the same again, and these conversations, that's why, take on a kind of urgency. That's why our theme for the summit this year is defining a new era. In the past, our speakers have included Prime Minister Narendra Modi, President Pranab Mukherjee, President Barack Obama, President George W. Bush, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, British Prime Ministers David Cameron, Gordon Brown, Tony Blair, Malaysia's Mahathir bin Mohamad, American Vice President Al Gore, among others. This year, our stellar list of speakers include Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman, Defense Minister Rajnath Singh, Minister of Micro, Small and Medium Enterprises Nitin Gadkari, Chief Minister Arvind Kejriwal, and Nationalist Congress Party founder and Chief Sharad Pawar. We have a host of brilliant doctors and scientists to talk to us about COVID-19 and the man who promises to vaccinate the 1.3 billion people of India, Adar Poonawalla. Nobel Prize winner Abhijit Banerjee will be speaking on economics and the economy, but the session I'm most looking forward to, tennis royalty couple Steffi Graf and Andre Agassi, and the no less royal Priyanka Chopra and Nick Jonas. As you can see, the pandemic hasn't dented our list of extraordinary speakers, and as the world grapples with the pandemic, we are looking forward to bringing together these leaders and hold conversations over the next 4 weeks that aim at drawing a blueprint for what lies ahead for India and the world. It's perhaps apt that the inaugural session in the summit is one which brings together two top minds working in this field. Never before have any of us looked with such frequency for updates about science and clinical studies as we have in the past few months. As COVID claimed the lives of 1.3 million people across the world, 1.3 lakh of them just in India, the only weapon that we've all had is knowledge. Knowledge that is evolving every single day. Initially, we thought we were going to be safer in the summer, and that masks protected others and weren't that essential to us. Now we know that the mask is the next best thing to a vaccine, and higher temperatures may not be a factor at all. But keeping us abreast of all of this information, keeping us and helping us make sense are our two guests today. Dr. Randeep Guleria, who's the head of the All India Institute of Medical Sciences, and Dr. Ashish K Jha, Dean of the School of Public Health at Brown University. Dr. Guleria has been at the forefront of the COVID fight in India, a key member of the government's task force on emergency responses. From assessing the country's medical infrastructure and responses, he's also now part of the government group that will look at vaccine delivery. How do you ensure that a population of 1.3 billion are vaccinated in a manner that is fair? How do you ensure that it is delivered to those who live in distant towns and villages? That's one of Dr. Guleria's key concerns at the moment, along with other members of a government task force. And like Dr. Guleria, Dr. Ashish K Jha is also a favorite with the press. He's been vocal about his criticism, not just about Donald Trump's COVID management, but also about Elon Musk spreading misinformation. Till September this year, Dr. Jha was at the Harvard T.H. School of Public Health. There and at Brown, Dr. Jha is acknowledged as a global expert on pandemic preparedness, advising state and federal policymakers. Dr. Jha was born in Bihar and moved to Canada when he was 9, graduating from Harvard Medical School in 1997. In conversation with Dr. Guleria and Dr. Jha is Sukumar Ranganathan, Hindustan Times' editor-in-chief. Sukumar is also the writer of a daily column on COVID called What You Need to Know Today that has become essential reading for anyone following the progress of the disease in India.
Good evening and welcome to this edition of the Hindustan Times Leadership Summit. It's a very special edition of the summit. It's happening online. We have two very, very special guests, Dr. Randeep Guleria of the All India Institute of Medical Sciences and Dr. Ashish K Jha of Brown. Both of them are specialists on COVID, which is the topic of the, I won't even say season, which is the topic of the year. It's probably going to be the topic of the coming decade. It is something that all of us are interested in. It's made many of us into mathematicians. It's made many people into scientists. Everyone has a view on COVID. And we are very privileged to have two people who can answer many of the questions we have on COVID. So without further ado, I'm going to start off. And the big question, which everyone has, is about the vaccine breakthroughs that have happened over the last 2 weeks, one last Monday and one this Monday. And I'm going to go to Dr. Jha first, and I'm going to ask him, is it really as big as everyone is making it out to be? Are you thrilled, happy, delighted?
All of those. Thank you very much for having me on. And first of all, I'm delighted to be on. So let's talk about that first. This is a wonderful opportunity. So I'm glad I get a chance to spend time with you. Let's talk vaccines. I have to tell you, I have been very pleasantly surprised at what we're seeing with vaccines. If we were all together 2 or 3 weeks ago, I would have said that I would be happy with a vaccine that was maybe 60% effective. I dare not hope for 70%. And yet we have two vaccines, one from Moderna, one from Pfizer, that have both shown to be 95% effective against this virus. That is incredible. That's in the range of what we have seen with the polio vaccine. It's almost as good as a measles vaccine. Again, I was not expecting it. There's still many, many challenges between having a vaccine be found to be effective and getting billions of people around the world vaccinated. So we should not underestimate those challenges, but we should still celebrate how the scientific breakthrough and what good news this is.
Dr. Guleria, you've got long years of experience at the front lines of India's medical system. Did you expect such a rapid breakthrough in the vaccine?
No, not at all. And first of all, let me really thank you for inviting me over. And let me say this is a very exciting time. And I think the next year is going to be even more exciting as more and more vaccines start coming into the realm of getting approvals and coming into usage. The success of the two vaccines, the Pfizer and the Moderna vaccine, is very, very, I would say, encouraging. No one expected such a high vaccine efficacy, and especially in the older age group, which is always a challenge because we have this whole issue of whether the immune response is not going to be that strong. So I think the data is very encouraging, and for all other vaccines which are also being made, it is going to be an encouraging news because all of them are sort of focusing on the same protein, the spike protein. The only challenge is the next step. Once you have the vaccines and you get the regulatory approval, then how do we get these vaccines down to really every individual, the high risk group, the frontline workers get vaccinated in terms of reaching out to all of them, getting the cold chain, the procurement, everything done. In my mind, that is also a huge task. So we've crossed one hurdle, but we still have another hurdle left in the coming months or the year. And I think it's going to be an exciting time as far as vaccine is concerned, because the fact that you will have many vaccines to choose from, and this will become very interesting as to which group will benefit the most from which vaccine and how long does the immunity last. So very interesting time. I think next year is going to see a lot of research and activities in the vaccine field.
Dr. Guleria, while many people in India are very, very happy to hear the news of the success of the vaccines, there's been a little bit of disquiet about the fact that we still don't have, India, for instance, doesn't have a deal with either Moderna or Pfizer. Do you think that's cause for concern? Or do you think there will be other vaccines and that the practicalities of actually distributing a vaccine that requires really cold temperatures is going to be very difficult, which probably means that the Pfizer vaccine is impractical for India.
That's true. So there is some talk going on between Pfizer and the Indian government, not that much with Moderna. But like you rightly said, there's going to be huge challenges as far as Pfizer vaccine is concerned, considering that it needs a cold chain of -70, -80 degrees centigrade. So that is going to be a huge challenge. But we have our the Oxford vaccine, which is being made by the Serum Institute of India, which is now completing its phase 3, and the data should be out from the UK by the end of this month, and probably also by the end of next month as far as India is concerned. Another company is actually already starting phase 3 trials as far as the Russian vaccine is concerned. And we already have 2 trials going on. Phase 3 has started as far as Bharat Biotech vaccine is concerned, and as far as the Cadila vaccine is concerned. So like I said in the beginning, we're going to have a large number of vaccines which may come. We may not be first off the block in terms of getting the vaccine, but we will have had our overall, let's say, cold chain in place and the distribution channels in place. We need by the time the vaccines are available. But I see in the first quarter of next year, we should have vaccines available in India. The challenge is going to be to prioritize and to give it to the priority groups in a manner that can reach out not only to the larger cities, but to smaller towns and to rural India also, so that everyone can get vaccinated. You see, we are looking at 2 basic things. One is to save lives, and the second is to break the chain of transmission so that the pandemic comes under control. To do that, the number of people who will need to be vaccinated is going to be significant. And that is why the vaccine program has to keep going on and on for a number of months over the next year before we could say that we've really reached let's say a plateau in terms of being able to break the chain of transmission substantially throughout the country, and I would say throughout the globe.
Dr. Jha, 2 related questions for you. The 2 vaccines which we've been talking about, Moderna and Pfizer, are both based on a new platform, mRNA, messenger RNA. Are you concerned that we've not taken our time to do a proper safety test to see what happens, because we've never had a successful mRNA vaccine before? And the second question, at the beginning of this, let's go back to February or March. If someone told you that you would have a vaccine in 10 months, would you have believed it? And as a result, do you think we've taken any shortcuts, or do you think everything has happened the way it should happen?
Great. 2 very good interrelated questions. So let's talk about safety of mRNA platforms, and then let's talk about whether we've had shortcuts. So I have to tell you, I'm not that worried about an mRNA vaccine. It is a new technology. There are a lot of new technologies that we use all the time, new technologies for drug delivery, new technologies for vaccines. And again, I think we're going to want to watch the safety data coming out of Moderna and Pfizer very closely. But at least as of now, probably 70,000 people have gotten vaccinated between these 2 vaccines. That's a lot of people. And we will be able to see if there are any significant effects. But to me, the mRNA vaccine is just a delivery platform, and I'm not largely concerned that it's going to end up having any kind of negative effect. And I guess my best way of saying it is, would I be comfortable getting one of those 2 vaccines? And the answer right now, based on the data, and I'll look at the full set of data when they come out, but based on everything I've seen so far, the answer is absolutely yes. Which then gets to the second question of how did we pull off vaccine development in just 10 months? And did we do shortcuts? And the short answer is there were no shortcuts. Typically with vaccine development, there is a sequential process. You do animal studies, then you go on to small human trials. It takes a while to recruit them. Then you raise money for the next phase. You do very careful planning to say, should we move forward with this or not? And all of it is to really minimize financial losses and to make sure that you're kind of prioritizing things correctly. In this pandemic, we have done things in parallel. So what that has meant is when we started human trials and we did animal trials at the same time, both of them were done, but usually you would do one before the other, and we took the risk of doing both. And so all of the steps that would go into a normal vaccine trial have been done They've been done much more quickly. We've been willing to suffer financial losses. We've been willing to say we will make a bet on a phase 2 and a phase 3, and we will start producing the vaccine, even if we don't know if it's going to work or not. Those are exactly the right things you want to do in a crisis like this. So I think that's part of it. And then the one last thing I will say, and this is really important for the future, part of the reason we got a vaccine in 10 months is we had spent years developing vaccines for the original SARS virus, for SARS-CoV-1. And so we had quite a head start in terms of understanding the spike protein, understanding what we would target. So it wasn't like we had no idea what this virus was. It was very closely related to its cousin, and that gave us a head start. The reason why this is important is we should not assume that if there is another global pandemic with another virus, we should not assume that we're going to have such a head start. So we actually, as this pandemic begins to come to a close, need to start planning for pandemics where we won't have that head start, and then think about how do we build a system that can generate a vaccine quickly.
Dr. Guleria, while the vaccine is one part of it, treatment is another very, very important part of it. And one of the things we've noticed, and I want your opinion on whether you think this is true or not, is that the data seems to show that most countries have got progressively better at saving lives as the pandemic has gone, right? I mean, in the initial period of the pandemic, the death rate was very, very high. And then over a period of time, at least purely from the data point of view, it seemed as if the progressive death fatality rates were coming down. Do you think that over a period of time, health systems, doctors figured out what to do to save lives?
Definitely. I think as we started off with the pandemic, somewhere in February, March, even in our hospital, there was very little we knew how to manage patients with COVID-19. And a lot of it was done on whatever data was emerging from China. And we were using anti-HIV drugs like lopinavir, ritonavir. There were a lot of other drugs which were being used. And gradually we had more and more data which showed that they were not of much use. We were reluctant to use steroids because the data from H1N1 pandemic and analysis there actually had tried to show that you had a higher mortality if you gave steroids, especially during the early stage when there was viremia. So all of this evolved, and we then realized that, steroids are useful. They really save lives based on the recovery trial. The utility of remdesivir, which has gone from one end to the other, established itself. We also had the use of a lot of other indigenous drugs, which I still would say we need more data in. But we are getting studies coming in, whether it be drugs like ivermectin, the debate on hydroxychloroquine, or the new drug, the drug that we use in India, which has also got a license from the drug controller, favipiravir, which is basically an antiviral for influenza, but has been shown to have a broad antiviral effect against even Ebola and other viruses. Also, I think our management strategies improved. We realized that oxygen makes a huge difference, and we have people who may be hypoxemic, but they don't realize it, so-called happy hypoxia. And that even conscious proning, that if you just ask these patients to lie on their stomach or this side, will help in terms of improving oxygenation. So I think over the last few months, whether it be managing sick patients who have sepsis or ARDS, managing moderate patients, or developing a treatment strategy, or placing these drugs in the right time, because there was a time when I remember talking to doctors in India, and they would give a cocktail of all drugs in the beginning, feeling that something will work. But we realize that that's not true. You may have some drugs which may cause more harm, especially if you're giving anti-IL-6 drugs very early, and they can actually lead to superadded infection. So our protocols have evolved, and that has led to a decrease in mortality. We've also been able to pick up warning signs and be able to get people inside hospital early and manage them. But having said that, we still have a significant mortality, and I think it's important, especially the elderly and those who have comorbidities, be monitored closely. It's somehow because of what I would call as COVID fatigue. We're seeing a lot of people not following the general precautions that we keep advising, and many of the young individuals who go out, get the infection, carry it to their homes, where the elderly get the infection, and this can also contribute to a higher morbidity and mortality. So I think it would be very sad for someone to lose an individual now when the vaccine is just around the corner, And it's very important for people to understand that if we hold on for just a few more months, then we could actually save a large number of lives, especially of the elderly and those with comorbidities, because the vaccine will protect them. And that is what these two trials have shown. And that is why it's need to really sort of emphasize more strongly that COVID appropriate behavior is more important now than ever before, because there is light at the end of the tunnel. So you can't say you don't know when this will get over. We know that it will now start getting over sometime next year.
Dr. Guleria, quick question. Steroids, as you said, dexamethasone is one drug which is shown to work. Another one which has been shown to work in the US, monoclonal antibodies. Is there any plan to start using them in India? Or do you think they're just priced out of the market?
So monoclonal antibodies are good. There are two companies which are making them, which have really gone ahead. One, of course, is the Regeneron, which was used by the US president, and the other is by Lilly. They have shown a lot of good evidence, but they're still in the early trials, and we still need to have more data before we can say that they would be useful. Having said that, it's important to remember that monoclonal antibodies is the whole sort of gambit of what we call passive immunity. Convalescent plasma is also a type of passive immunity in a more crude form. Monoclonal antibodies is much more refined as far as that is concerned. It's also expensive. So whether we'll have enough doses to really offer to everyone, whether the cost will be actually something that can be met, and whether if the vaccine comes in, how much would we require these is something that we will come to know over the next few months. But it has some degree of a role, especially in early disease. It doesn't have much role in patients who are requiring oxygen or who are on a ventilator. So the use of and the trials have stopped in using it in this situation. So they have a limited role in mild disease, where we already know that large number of people will recover on their own and therefore may not really benefit that much with monoclonal antibodies. So it, I think, still needs to be positioned properly in the whole, let's say, evolution of COVID-19 infection in an individual.
Dr. Jha, one of the things that we've noticed is that our understanding of the disease itself, the virus, has grown over a period of time. When it all started happening, everyone thought this was just a respiratory tract infection, upper respiratory tract infection initially. And over a period of time, there has actually been literature that suggests that COVID could actually be closer to an autoimmune disorder given the kind of reactions that it causes in the human body than anything else. How well do you think we understand this disease? Do we know it well enough now?
Well, it's a very good question. The short answer is we know it much better than we did 8 months ago. And we understand that it is a far more complex disease than we had initially thought. But unfortunately, there's still a lot we don't understand about this disease. So one of the things that people should understand about COVID is, and I really can't think of any virus that has such a broad range of effects, from 20–30% of people having no symptoms at all ever, to many people having very mild symptoms, to some people getting very sick, to some people dying. Like, there just aren't that many conditions that have this broad range of impacts. So clearly it has something to do with people's host immunity. It has something to do with a whole host of other factors, maybe how much virus you were infected with. But the bottom line is we are still sorting all this out. So there's a lot in this. So again, actually, let me make two more quick points. One is the way I think about this disease, and you really heard this from Dr. Guleria, is that there are two phases of the disease. There's the viremic phase, and then there's the immunologic phase. In the early phase, it acts and functions much more like a normal virus. In the second half, there's this very profound immunologic response that almost makes it look like an autoimmune disease that is triggering. It triggers that in some people, but not others. We've got to sort all of that stuff out. I would say we've made progress, but there's a lot that we don't know about this disease.
Dr. Guleria, as someone who's been in the front lines, what has your experience been with this? I mean, could you just take us through your journey when it first emerged? And you have a lot of experience in this. You're considered India's top pulmonologist. You probably know more about this than lots of other people. What was your first reaction when you saw the first patients? And then over a period of time, how has it evolved?
So for many of us who have been involved in pandemics and looking at respiratory infections have been really saying that we may have a pandemic for a very long period in time. As a matter of fact, I remember in the late 1990s, we had an outbreak of what was then H5N1, which was known as bird flu. And subsequently, of course, we had SARS. And we had a large number of poultry which died, and few individuals also died. And this was a virus which had a case fatality of more than 60%. And we were all worried that if this virus mutates twice, it would have the ability to have sustained human-to-human spread, which is required for any novel virus to cause a pandemic. Luckily, that did not happen. Then we had, of course, H1N1, we've had MERS, we've had the Zika, and so many other viral infections. So I think retrospectively look back, there were enough warning signs to say that a large pandemic is going to come and we need to prepare for it. Unfortunately, let's be very honest that we really didn't put in as much of investment and as much of effort we needed to do for a pandemic preparation. So when it first happened, the first thing that we realized is two things. One is we need to learn more about this virus, and secondly, we need to prepare for an outbreak where you will have a surge of number of cases. So a lot of effort went into really training manpower, a lot of academic activities in terms of understanding about this virus, protecting healthcare workers. We did a lot of workshops, morning, evening, to how do you don and doff a PPE, how do you protect yourself? Because when you're talking of healthcare workers, you're not only talking of residents or doctors or the faculty, you're talking of the nursing officers, the technicians. A lot of them will also go into a COVID area, and you can't have them having an infection. So when you're teaching people infection control, it has to be right down to the sanitation worker, because he's also involved in running that hospital in the COVID area. Similarly, you have to have dedicated areas. We can't have a mixing of patients of COVID and non-COVID. So there was a huge challenge that every hospital faced in the beginning in terms of restructuring its infrastructure into COVID and non-COVID area, even looking at ventilation, so that you make sure that there is no chance of infection through ventilation, training your staff, and then developing strategies of having a good supply chain of PPEs, N95, drugs. I remember in India in the early days, there was a huge issue of shortage of PPEs. And then we did a project, we started a little bit of a project which we published, where we tried to look at, can you recycle PPEs? So if you have a PPE which is being used and if it's not torn, can you really get it recycled and can it be used again? We felt it would also decrease the increase in plastics which has happened globally as a sort of fallout of the pandemic. So there were a lot of challenges that we went through each phase as this pandemic evolved. And like you said, treatment strategies were being developed. Every week you would find the protocol would change to some extent in terms of managing mild, moderate and severe cases. What would you do? What is the new thing that has come out? Would you try this new strategy? What is the evidence? So it's been a huge learning curve. And I would say that there's been a huge amount of research which has been done over the last 8 to 9 months. If you look at the papers that have come in, it's actually phenomenal in terms of COVID-19. And for many of us, just to stay in touch with what's happening is become a big challenge, because there is such a lot of research being done, which is very heartening and helping us in terms of trying to really get things right as far as the pandemic is concerned.
One of our columnists actually put a number to it. He said that over the last 8 months, there have been 50,000 papers that have been published on COVID, which is a phenomenal number. But coming to our knowledge of the disease, over a period of time, there have been lots of questions. Some have been answered, some have not been answered. And Dr. Jha, you referred to some of this. Not everyone exposed to the virus gets infected. Not everyone infected passes it on. I don't know whether you saw the Science magazine, the study that was published in Science magazine based on a study of 85,000 people in Tamil Nadu and Andhra Pradesh, which showed that 8% of the people are responsible for 70% of the infection or 60% of the infection, which means this is a disease that depends on super spreaders. And while a lot of questions have got answered, one issue on which there has been a lot of confusion, and right, I mean, every day there are 2 papers on this. It's a question which I'm pretty confused about, so I'm hoping that both of you will be able to shed light on this. So Dr. Jha, you first. Immunity, short-term, long-term, linked to antibodies or not, the fact that antibodies vanish, but then you have another study that says you have B cells and T cells which remember the virus and helps. I'm asking you this also because whether a vaccine is effective or not will also depend to a significant extent on the quality of immunity that a vaccine is able to give. So what's your own sense?
Yeah, great, thank you. Very good question. Let me say a couple of things as a starting point. Immunity is complicated, and it has felt to me that in the last 9 months, everybody has become an immunologist. So people need to take a step back and understand that this is a complex area, but the evidence so far has been largely reassuring. I would say that I look at the data on immunity, I look at all the mechanisms by which we understand immunity, and I'm feeling reassured. So let's talk a little bit more about that. We know across the world that 50, 60 million people have been known to be infected with this virus. There have been reinfections, some reinfections as short as 2 months after the initial reinfection, but those are very uncommon. So what we would expect, I never expected 100% immunity forever. That's not a realistic expectation for any virus. What you should expect, what I was hoping, is that most people would be immune for at least some period of time, ideally a year or longer. What we're finding is almost everybody who's been infected and recovered seems to have some degree of immunity. Occasionally not, right? There are going to be exceptions. And what we're finding is that that immunity is durable for at least 8 or 9 months. It might be much longer. We just don't have the experience. We don't have 5 years of experience with this virus. So at this point, what I don't, and by the way, we need to not get worried about studies that show that antibodies disappear or they get very low. That happens with lots of diseases where you still have immunity. So the key point here is immunity looks like it happens for most people. It looks like it's pretty durable for at least 8-9 months. And if I were at this point betting, I would say most people are going to be immune for at least a year. And by the way, I think that'll happen with the vaccine as well, though we don't know, of course. And so based on all of that, my guess right now is that we may be coming up with vaccines where we have to get a booster shot every year. That's okay. It's not great, but it's okay. Or maybe it'll last longer. We don't know. But I have become less and less worried about immunity over time as the data have come in. And I try to avoid the headlines that I think cause all of us more fear than they do give us, insights into what's going on.
Dr. Guleria, I have an audience question for you. We have a large number of people who've logged on. And this is an interesting question also because I think you've been right there at the center of action. Looking back at the last 10 months, are you happy with the speed and effectiveness of India's response to fight the pandemic? And how ready are we to fight another pandemic in the future?
So I think that response has been pretty good. We've been actually done pretty well in terms of being innovative and have had a very interesting journey. We've written a book on this, as a matter of fact, me and Dr. Gagandeep Kant and Dr. Chandrakant Lahiri on Till We Win, which is actually documents India's journey and battle through these 9 months. But what it basically has shown us is that we are a very resilient nation. When we started off, there was a lot of panic that we would not have enough PPEs, we would not have enough ventilators. We were able to manage all of that. We are now we have the capacity to export PPEs. We started off with saying that we would have very few virology labs which had the capacity to really diagnose COVID-19 using RT-PCR. Now we have more than 2,000 labs scattered all over the country, and we're doing almost 1.5 million tests a day. For our country, that's a huge achievement. So I think there has been a lot of learning that we've had over the past few months It's shown that we can, if we have the will, be ready for another pandemic. But I would say that there has to be more investment in the public sector. There has to be more involvement of healthcare professionals in preparing, whether it be surveillance, whether it be plans for how do you upscale your infrastructure, so that whenever we have the next pandemic, we learn from this and take it forward rather than making the same mistakes again.
Okay, we have around 5 minutes left and there are a bunch of audience questions. So I'm going to try and do a bit of a rapid fire here and address it to specific people. Dr. Jha, home tests. Quick opinion on home tests. The first one was approved yesterday. What's your view?
I think it's great. I want to see many, many more of these. I'm sorry that it has taken us so long to develop these things. I wish we had them 3 or 6 months ago. It's going to be a while before they're widely available, but I think it's great and we should have more of them.
Dr. Guleria, what proportion of India do you think will be vaccinated next year? What proportion of the Indian population do you think will be vaccinated next year?
That's a tough question. I hope that we are able to do a large number. I'm sure all the healthcare workers should be, and the frontline workers would be vaccinated. But then we need to also look at the high risk group. It will depend how many vaccines come into the market within the first quarter in terms of regulatory approvals.
A quick add-on. India has deals with 2 of the companies, right? I mean, we have tripartite deals with AstraZeneca and Serum Institute, and Novavax and Serum Institute. Both of those are being made at Serum Institute. Are there plans to strike deals with any more?
So there are already, the Russian vaccine is also being made at Dr. Reddy's laboratory. That is going into also phase 3 trial. And we have our own indigenous vaccine being made by Zydus Cadila. So like I said, we will have a number of vaccines which will get regulatory approval early next year. Depending on the number of doses each of them can produce and what is the efficacy of the vaccine that comes out, we may have that many million doses to give to the population. So it will sort of depend on a lot of factors. But hopefully, I think that by the end of next year, a significant number of the population would be vaccinated so as to actually see a downward trend or maybe have a good control on the pandemic.
Proportion, would you say 30%? Would you say 40%? Would you say 25%?
It's a difficult guess. I hope it is 30 to 40% at least, but I would not hazard a guess.
All right, Dr. Jha, what phase of the pandemic do you think we are in? Right, I mean, it's ebbed, it's flowed. There are some countries which have seen 3 waves, much like the US has. Delhi, which is where we are, the Union Territory, has again seen 3 waves. What phase do you think we are in right now?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I am hopeful that we are sort of in the last big wave of this pandemic, that while things are very bad in the US and very bad in many parts of Europe, India is in a bit better shape than it was a couple of months ago. Much of East Asia is in better shape. And as what will happen is as the vaccine starts rolling out, it will start making a difference unto itself because it will start slowing the spread of the virus, because it will start building up population immunity. And so in a country like America, where maybe my guess is 15 to 20% of people have already been infected, once another 10 or 20% of people are vaccinated, you start getting some of the benefits of population immunity. It's not herd immunity at that level, but it is helpful. So I'm hoping that we're not going to see any more major outbreaks, but you'll see lots of places with minor, small, medium-sized outbreaks happening probably all through 2021, if not beyond.
Dr. Guleria, Dr. Jha said 15 to 20% of the US population has probably already been infected. What do you think the corresponding proportion for India is? Do you think it's likely to be around the same?
I think so. The serosurveillance data did suggest that in certain pockets it was even higher. In Delhi, it was almost to the tune of 25%. And in certain areas, especially the urban slums where there is a lot of crowding, it's close to 40 to 50% of people in. So it has varied from region to region depending upon the crowd density and number of people who got infected. It's likely to be much lower in rural area where there is the population is more widely sort of spread out. So I think that number would be reasonable for India also. Maybe it's slightly on the higher side, if I put it that way.
Okay, final question for both of you, and you can answer it as shortly as you want to. Do you think we've sort of solved this? Do you think we've got the virus licked?
I think the virus is going to be with us for a very long time. And what I would say is, instead of we have solved it or beaten it, I would say we are learning to figure out how to live with it. And that with a vaccine, we will learn how to live with it in a way that doesn't cause us the level of disruption that it did this year. But I don't think that the virus is going to go away. I think we're going to be managing it. And what I'm most hopeful of is that we use this very painful year to learn how to do this better next time.
Dr. Guleria?
So viruses have been there on this planet even before mankind or Homo sapiens were there. And therefore, to say that we'll have licked it is going to be a little bit too premature. Like has already been mentioned, this is a very smart virus. The more you learn about it, the more you admire it. It goes into your lungs without you even being symptomatic. We have individuals who are asymptomatic, but will show patches on the CT scan. So it really bypasses your defense mechanisms. And you don't realize that you not only have the virus in your nose and throat, but it's gone right into your lungs, and you say that you have no symptoms. A virus which can do that and which can have this whole varied presentation and cause such a lot of systemic manifestation, the extrapulmonary manifestation, is something we have to be very wary of. And as has been said, I think it will stay around for some time. We will have to learn to live with it and be able to control it so that we don't have outbreaks like we've had this year, but it's going to be here for some time.
On that note, Drs. Guleria and Jha, it was a pleasure having you on the opening session. I think we are all a lot wiser about the virus and the pandemic than we were at the beginning. Thank you so much for taking the time out to do this. And with that, I'll hand you over to my colleague, Sunetra.
Thank you, Sonar. It really was an enlightening conversation. And I think the best part about it is how uplifting it was and how, it presented a really hopeful scenario, especially with Dr. Jha saying that perhaps we're in the last phase of the pandemic. And Dr. Guleria is saying that by this time next year, significant percentage of India's population will be vaccinated. So these are the takeaways that I'm going to take away from. Thank you so much, Dr. Jha, Dr. Guleria. And of course, we've heard one aspect of the COVID pandemic right now. We heard both the doctors talking about the vaccine. Now, the next session, it's just 5 minutes away, is going to have a lot more about the vaccine because our guest is Serum Institute's Adar Poonawalla. He will be in conversation with HT's Health Editor Sanchita Sharma. So you don't want to miss that session. Stay tuned. We're coming up in just a bit.
A vision becomes a milestone when it helps make a cleaner, smarter, and a more beautiful planet. So that you can set off on joyous new journeys and adventures. Building stronger bonds and bridging impossible distances, which take you from the ever new to the forever beautiful. Opening up vistas and windows to a vibrant new world. A vision becomes a milestone when it touches millions of lives. Aditya Birla Group. Big in your life.
Thank you, Sonal. Thank you, Sonal. Thank you, Sonal.
Why is everyone thanking me?
I'll tell you. When you buy an Usha sewing machine, more than 1% of the proceeds go towards empowering women in rural India through Usha Salai schools. That's why.
Thank you, Sonal.
have 10 minutes or I'm gone.
I'll take a lot less.
Send in the drones.
Show maps.
It seems like everybody wants you.
I'm born magnetic. The all-new i20. Born magnetic.
Life is about to change, eh? No more 8 घंटे की नींद, no more late night movies, no more parties with friends.
बिल्कुल सही कहा तुमने. इसके फ्यूचर के लिए अब नो मोर हॉलीडेज, नो मोर शॉपिंग और नो मोर फिजूल का खर्च.
लेकिन अगर इसका फ्यूचर ऑलरेडी सिक्योर्ड हो तो?
Really?
डैडी बने हो, देवदास नहीं. जीना छोड़ दूंगा, हॉलीडेज छोड़ दूंगा.
स्मार्ट लोगों की क्लियर है प्रायोरिटी, बाकी सब बाद में. क्यूट वाले मेहमान से पहले LIC.
Luxury. In India, I discovered that true luxury isn't something you buy off a shelf. True luxury is a feeling that you are the Maharani of your world, and it can be all designed around you. All the beauty is yours. All the music is yours. India showed me that luxury doesn't follow designers and brands. True luxury follows its own heart.
Incredible India.
It's a human thing to want the truth. It doesn't matter if you're older or part of the youth. We certainly don't like being kept in the dark between all those lies and those question marks. But lately, it doesn't seem to bother us when they bend and break and twist and crush the truth that's supposed to matter so much. In the race to be the first who breaks the news, they seem to have broken the news. And do you even remember the time when the news was supposed to make you wise? And now you can spend hours consuming and listening them shouting and complaining. And in the end, just feeling worse off than you did in the beginning. Which begs the question, does all of this not trouble our generation? When they push opinions and call them facts as we watch the fourth pillar crumble and collapse. It is a human thing to want the truth and to make every claim carry its burden of proof. To expect that the first voice you hear is also the last word that's there.
Meet the all-new Hindustan Times. Now experience, engage and express. Hindustan Times. First voice, last word.
If Dr. Randeep Guleria and Dr. Ashish Jha gave us insights into the science of COVID-19, the next session promises to shed light on a completely different aspect of the pandemic. Adar Poonawalla is the young businessman who the world is looking at as the largest vaccine manufacturer. The CEO and owner of the Serum Institute of India has the world media hanging on to every one of his words as we all wait for a vaccine to be ready. Adar Poonawalla has a lot of skin in the game. He's invested $250 million of his own money into the COVID vaccine development. So much so that his father, Cyrus Poonawalla, who's known as Vaccine King, was initially skeptical. But that's the kind of risk that is involved in this business, as in order to be ready to deliver vaccines, the Serum Institute started production in August, which was much, much before AstraZeneca or any other vaccine maker got the final clearance. That's the reason why he can confidently assure members of the public that they will be able to get doses of the Oxford vaccine as early as January. An advocate of mass testing across the country, Adar Poonawalla has been reassuring members of the public that when the COVID vaccine is ready, it'll be affordable for all. His confidence stems from the fact that his company has substantially brought down global prices by more than 50% and launched many new vaccines such as rotavirus. All eyes are now on him for his current project, the COVID vaccine production. And in conversation with him, we have Hindustan Times' health editor, Sanchita Sharma.
When will India have a vaccine against coronavirus disease? And how safe and effective will it be? Well, these are questions all of us are asking. And lately, we've had good news on the vaccine front globally. We've had Pfizer telling us their vaccine is 95% effective, and Moderna saying their vaccine is 94.5% effective. But these vaccines are expensive, and they also need to be stored at ultra low temperatures. Sometimes the Pfizer vaccine has to be stored at -70 to -80 degrees, which is actually colder than the Antarctic winter. So the whole world is really focusing on the Oxford vaccine, which is a vaccine which is available through COVAX, which is the WHO-supported organization, which provides affordable vaccines to poor countries. And there the vaccine is available for $2 a dose. And India plays a huge role here because we have Serum Institute and Mr. Poonawalla, welcome to the show, who have the capacity and the capability to manufacture millions of doses of these vaccines in a very, very short time. So now we're going to talk about how safe and effective these vaccines are. Global trials are going on already. We have the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine, which is being, the trials are going on in the United States, in the UK, in Brazil, and South Africa, and the trial has also begun in India. So I want to ask you, Mr. Poonawalla, what are the early findings? What do the results show?
Firstly, a very good evening to all your distinguished panelists and participants here at the Hindustan Times Leadership Summit. Nice to talk to you. If we go back to April, May, never did I even dream, and my team here of scientists at Serum Institute, that we'd have such a good vaccine developed, or all these other vaccines developed so quickly by the end of this year. So whilst, you've got, as you rightly mentioned, the Moderna and Pfizer vaccines that are a little expensive and very difficult to store logistically because of their temperatures, they are seeming to be very powerful and effective. The real question is, how long will it protect you for? You want a vaccine that can protect you at least for a couple of years. That's the goal that the health community and all the developers are trying to get to. What we've heard so far is that the Oxford AstraZeneca product, that is one of the products that we're going to make, and I just want to correct you, we've done a deal at $3, not $2, with COVAX, which is, the body that is Gavi, CEPI, and WHO. The vaccine so far is proving to work very well, even in the elderly, which was a concern that we all had early on. It's induced a good T-cell response, which is an indicator for your long-term immunity, and then you've got a good antibody response as well. So time will tell whether these vaccines are really going to protect you for the long term. Nobody can answer that for any of these vaccines today. Anyone claiming that is, just shooting in the dark and hoping. We're all hoping that these vaccines, all of these vaccines, protect us for the long term. So we'll have to wait and see. Having said that, we, in about 2 to 3 weeks, are told that the UK and other studies for the Oxford AstraZeneca product, the efficacy results will be announced and the trial will be unblinded. So we should wait and watch what that has to say, and then we can decide. But irrespective of that, as you know, and we've been talking about it, that we've been making and stockpiling millions of doses ahead of time so that, we can get a head start on the supply.
So what you're saying is we will get results by, let's say, the first week of December from the global trials. What does the data from India show? Because a lot of people have been vaccinated across 15 centers here as well.
Well, there's been no safety concerns. Everything's been fine. And, even the Indian study is a much smaller study with 1,600 patients, because it's only a bridging study to show equivalence and show that it's the same. So at least from the safety angle, we've heard no complaints or major reactions, adverse events. So that's always a good sign. And that was, of course, expected because it had already gone through a safety study in the UK. So we'll have to wait and see. And even the results for that, the efficacy, partial immunogenicity results rather, that'll come out with the Indian study also in about a month and a half. So we'll wait and watch.
So if we get emergency use authorization, when is the earliest that we can get a vaccine in India?
Well,
you all want so.
Yes, of course, that's the main question that everyone wants to know. And as soon as the UK authorities, the MHRA and the European, EMEA approves it for emergency use, we will apply to the drug controller in India, and hopefully very soon we can also get an emergency use authorization. Again, that'll be, just to clarify, a limited use for the frontline healthcare workers, the elderly, and all of that. So again, for everyone watching, it's going to take another 3 to 4 months before it's available, to the general public, because that's the way the emergency use licensure will probably work.
What you're saying is by April or May, we should all have access to this vaccine, right? In India.
That's right.
That's excellent. And what about children? Because will we have data on children by then, or will it just be for adults?
So in about 3 or 4 months, we'll have data on, the below 18 years of age group. Right now, the vaccines are recommended from 18 plus to, 90 or whatever. And so I think the children will have to wait a little bit longer. But the good news, as we all know, is that it's not so bad and serious for the children. So this disease, unlike other diseases like measles, pneumonia and all, which are very deadly for children, this disease is seeming to be less of a nuisance for children. And of course, they can still be carriers. If the schools are open and they get infected, they can give it to you. So that's why we want to vaccinate the elderly and others first, who are most vulnerable. And then once we have enough safety data to go on in children as well, then we can roll it out and recommend it, for children in about, I would say, 3 to 4 months from now.
So you tweeted yesterday saying that a good vaccine is a vaccine which is safe, effective, is easy to store and supply, and also offers long-term protection. So would you say the Oxford vaccine fits the bill?
Well, so far it's ticking all the boxes. Of course, on the point of the long-term protection, as I said, only time will tell. We need another 6 months to a year to know that. But of course, it's very affordable. It's certainly safe. And it's stored at +2 to 8 degrees, which is a temperature that, all the reefer vans and trucks that we have in India and the cold storages that we have, which is basically your logistics and infrastructure that India has, it's the ideal temperature. In fact, some vaccines will be at -20, and of course, some which are even harder to manage at -70. But so if you look at, the different ranges of vaccines that are being developed, both in India and globally, +2 to 8 degrees is the best temperature.
So what is the vaccine going to be priced at for the general public? Because you said you offered it at $3 a dose to COVAX and the WHO. But for the general public, people like me, when I have to buy it from a chemist, how much do I pay for it?
It'll probably end up being around $5 to $6 a dose, with an MRP of 1,000 rupees. Of course, the government of India will be getting it at far cheaper because of a price, a much lower price, probably around $3 to $4, because they'll be buying they'll be buying large volumes, hundreds of millions of doses. So they'll get the access to the price which is similar to what COVAX has got, which is $3. And the general public, as I mentioned, will probably have to pay around 500 to 600 rupees. Today vaccines like the pneumococcal vaccine today, for example, is around 1,000 rupees. So we're still pricing it far cheaper and more affordable than even some of the other vaccines that we have today on the market.
So you got into the act very early, way back in April. There was no viable vaccine then, and people were just starting to work on vaccines. So, and you took many calculated risks. You've tied up with 5 different developers. So, what is your advice to other vaccine makers? Because it really gave you the capacity and the capability to scale up production very, very quickly. So, do you think that's the way forward?
Well, I can't advise others on how to, take risks, because everyone has a different appetite to take risk. We are a privately listed company and don't have investors or other shareholders or bankers to be accountable to. So I was able to take a lot of risk. A lot of my critics said, oh, but do you know what you're doing? Why are you betting so big on this one or that one? If this doesn't work out, what are you going to do? You'll have lost hundreds of millions of dollars and, time. So we have to very carefully, scientifically calculate our risk. And that's why we chose and bet on these candidates, Novavax, Oxford AstraZeneca, and some of the others like Codagenics and the Spy Biotech RBD vaccine, because we had no choice. So at least I felt I had no other moral choice. It was almost my responsibility and duty. Otherwise, countless lives, would have been lost next year. Because imagine if I took the decision now at this stage, when we know that the vaccine is going to produce good results, we will have lost 6 months of hundreds of millions of doses next year, which would have been available at the end of the year instead of early on. And God knows how many lives would have been lost. So I took that call along with my team to just bet and commit and hope that all this would work out, and it has to a large extent. And it's been very stressful at that time when we were trying to get all this to work out and rejig capacity and facilities and manpower and get equipment in record time. We've broken records on everything. This sort of thing would have taken 2 or 3 years to do. We've done it in 4 months by rejigging facilities and, redesigning them and getting equipment there. So, it's been a Herculean task, and we're very happy now that we're almost now on an autopilot, waiting just for the vaccine results to come, and then we can churn out hundreds of millions more of the vaccine.
What are your production plans of the next few months, say from now to June?
Well, we're planning to make about 100 million doses on a monthly basis. At the moment, we're at a 50 to 60 million dose capacity on a monthly basis as an output. By February, we'll have gone to 100 million doses per month. So right now, I've dedicated 2 facilities. I'll dedicate another 2 facilities by January, February, which are getting validated. So that's how we'll double our monthly output, both to India and to COVAX. So that's the plan.
What's your agreement with the government of India? How many doses are you providing of both the Oxford vaccine as well as Novavax?
Well, it's ongoing at the moment, so I won't comment, but they want a few 100 million doses by July. So they want 300 to 400 million doses by July. I don't know if they'll take all of that from Serum Institute. I think they'll have to decide or comment on that. But we're gearing up certainly to give and offer that kind of volume to India and still have a few 100 million to offer to COVAX also by July, August of next year.
So there's no firm agreement as yet, right?
Not yet.
Talks. So neither for the Oxford vaccine as well as Novavax. Okay. And which are the other countries which have pre-ordered with you? Because I believe Bangladesh is in talks.
Yes, we've got Bangladesh. We're in talks with maybe even Nepal and some other countries in Africa. But we haven't really signed and committed anything else beyond Bangladesh at the moment because, COVAX itself is handling all of Africa, and that's a population of 2 billion. So we don't really want to right now partner with many other countries and have bilaterals because we won't have enough stock to give. We'll be then committing more than what we can supply. So we don't want to do that. We want to handle India as a priority first and manage Africa as well at the same time. And then after that, we can help out, as many other countries that may come forward.
You have tie-ups with 4 other companies. Which are the other promising vaccines and what are your plans for them?
So the reason why we tied up with the others was a 2-pronged approach. We wanted also to have in our basket live attenuated virus vaccines because those traditionally can manage with just 1 dose instead of 2 doses, which is what all these vaccines need. And also will give you a very long-term, strong, powerful protection. If you look at measles, because it's a live attenuated vaccine, it gives you that long-term, lifelong immunity once you take 2 shots or even 1 shot when you're a baby. So that's why we went ahead with Codagenics, which is a reverse codon and way of, removing the harmful properties of a virus, and it just basically is a way of attenuating the virus. And then got University of Pittsburgh in Pennsylvania, which is, using our measles vaccine with the COVID protein on it. So it'll become a combination vaccine of COVID and measles. And then you've got Novavax, which you know everything about. It's a spike protein, and Oxford. So that's covering up all the 5 that we have right now. And every 4 to 5 months, we hope to launch a new vaccine. So if we're talking about January, for the Oxford one, every quarter after that, we're hoping to launch another one after that with Scodogenics probably coming in at the end of 2021.
So we should have a basket of vaccines by the end of next year. So will we have all 5 or maybe 4 by the end of next year?
Well, I mean, if 2 or 3 work very well, so maybe we might not scale up all the others because there might not be any need to. And of course, you've got other Indian vaccine manufacturers also who will have some vaccines in the next 6 months. So I think India certainly is going to have more than enough supply of vaccines. How much India will start to help other countries is yet to be decided because we don't know how much supply the other countries will be able to produce and whether they'll take the Chinese and Russian vaccines as well. That's yet to be seen. So we don't know that.
What is the pricing? Because we're not competitive. When I'm talking about pricing, I'm talking about the vaccines which are in your basket as well as other vaccines that will be produced out of India. Will they all be in the $5 to $6 range, or are you likely to have more expensive vaccines?
They might be a bit higher because, if their volumes are lower, then they may have to price their vaccines a bit higher. But I really can't comment on what the other vaccine manufacturers will ultimately decide on their price. They'll have to look at their costing. It depends on their technology that they're using as well versus what we're using. I'm sure they'll be as reasonable in their pricing as possible. But it'll all again depend on their yields, their technology, their volumes, and then they'll have to comment on that. But let me tell you, the Indian vaccine prices will always be probably half of what we're seeing, or half or less than what we're seeing in the West with the $20 and $30 pricing that Moderna and Pfizer and other companies have publicly announced. Ultimately, I don't know if they'll come down on the price. Maybe they might, with public pressure and the global pressure which is there, because ultimately, if we're talking about $10, $20 vaccines, you'll need a budget of 60, 70, $100 billion, which the world doesn't have for vaccinating everybody. So we'll have to see.
Because I'm getting questions related to that. I have a question from Samar Verma, who says that you seem to be producing vaccines at a fraction of the cost of what Pfizer is charging. So do you think that some vaccine manufacturing firms may be earning supernormal profits from large government pre-orders?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, we saw that in the US. 100 million doses, for example, was bought by BARDA in the US from, I think, Pfizer, Sanofi, GSK, all those companies. Each one of them did a $2 billion deal for 100 million doses, which is roughly $20, as you know, per dose. Whereas we offered 100 million doses to COVAX and then did another 100 million doses, all at $3. So, we are, what is that, about 6-7 times cheaper and more affordable. So look, their costing, of course, in the US and Europe is higher to manufacture vaccines, but I don't know how much higher it is. So yes, they will make those supernormal profits. I don't know how long they'll make it for, because the world will soon realize that there are other options coming out of India and China, at more affordable prices. So I think it'll all reach some kind of equilibrium in about 6 months to a year. It's only that, to answer your question of who's asked that question, is that initially there might not be a choice for governments to just pay these high prices. But eventually, when there's enough supply and alternatives, you'll see prices coming down drastically.
You have a lot of people knocking at your door saying, please, please give me some vaccines. I'm talking about governments, of course. So do you have a lot of that? Is it difficult saying no?
Government has reached out to us. And of course, we've had to give the same answer that, we have to look at supplying our nation, which has got a huge population. And then, we'll see which countries we can then help out on priority and see where the most vulnerable populations are and the need is. And then ethically, as soon as we can supply to them, that's the plan. So, we'll all have to wait for a little while.
Concern also about this whole vaccine nationalism, saying that companies are just providing to their own country. So do you get accused of that? Or is it because you're providing to COVAX
That's the policy I took early on, because even I didn't know what to do. So I took a decision which ethically makes sense and logically, that give 50% of all my volumes to my country, because it's a very large country, And of course, because it's our own country, we have to look after ourselves first and then also others at the same time. Logically, why does that make sense? Because if you don't protect others in other countries, when they come to your country or you want their economies to open up for business, for imports, exports, other trade, we are all now connected as a global economy. So if they don't open up, we can't fully unleash our potential. All other sectors, whether it's auto, IT, steel, so many other entrepreneurs in India, they're dependent also on other countries and people traveling and opening up and making their products and services that, we need to sell or buy from them. So if we don't all open up, then we're, just looking inward. And that's where the US policies under President Trump were slightly off, and where he was only thinking about America, not realizing that in his own interest, he needed to look at other countries and helping other countries. And I'm sure the new president-elect will probably have a more global outlook, I assume, which is good for everybody.
Right, I have a question from Sunil Singh, who wants to know, do we have the storage and the transportation capacity for the vaccines planned across the nation? And do you think the private sector can really partner with governments in that? Because the kind of volumes we are talking of is huge, they're massive.
Yes, so to answer that, we already have a lot of cold chain infrastructure which we use for our universal immunization programs. And I've been talking to the government at the highest levels, and they're also going to have to reach out to a lot of these private cold chain operators. And it seems, my team has also found quite a few people that we're going to tie up with also to logistically help the government and support at least transporting the vaccine initially to the 40, 45 odd depots across different states. And then after that, the government will have to distribute it and find other innovative ways to not just use hospitals and clinics, but other ways and places where healthcare professionals can be deployed and we can vaccinate, and cover more people.
Right, then I have a question from Vicky Kapoor, who wants to know, have there been any significant side effects of the Oxford vaccine so far? That's something people are really scared of because they think
of course. It's any new vaccine, even we were concerned. And we found that after injecting the vaccine into thousands of patients of all different ages, from 18 to I think 70 plus or whatever, the mildest symptoms were there, your little fever, weakness, headache, which is normal of a normal cold that you'd get. And when they were treated with paracetamol, in 1 or 2 days, even those symptoms went away. So nothing beyond that. Initially there were those issues that were there due to those neurological effects that were being found, but they were completely non-vaccine related. Those people unfortunately had that in their family. It was a genetic or a thing found in their family. So it was ruled out completely by all the regulators that it was not vaccine related. So we have no real safety concerns now. That's the good.
Bhavesh Dattani, who wants to know approximately how many doses will be available by the end of the first quarter of 2021. He's clearly talking about the Oxford vaccine.
Well, as I said, at least 300 to 400 million doses, as we've always maintained, and we're on track for that. So that's what we're aiming to get, and there's no reason why we shouldn't reach that target.
We've answered this question before, but Mayank Agarwal again wants to know that, assuming a non-optimistic, pessimistic stance, what seems to be a fair timeline by which the vaccine will be available for public use, which is the question everyone. So
let me just clarify this point. We are basing the assumption of an emergency licensure based on positive UK results. So these are the caveats, that if we get caveats that if we have a good UK result coming in November, end of November, early December, we apply for an emergency licensure use. So you have the vaccine for, again, the vulnerable populations by Jan, Feb. And then, as I said, March, April for the general public. Now, if any of these milestones get delayed, then of course, and at the moment, there's no reason why we think they should be delayed. So if all that goes according to plan, these are the timelines that we're looking at.
We have a question from Ravi Vediswaran, who says, how do we know that the vaccine is safe, looking at the varied population with different co-morbidities? It's safer than COVID, right?
Yes, that's one way to put it, certainly. And also, if they want to read the actual publications that are coming out from Lancet and other magazines, if they really want to do a deep dive to know and understand, they can read all about the 20,000+ people that have received this vaccine, and also the same platform, the chimp adenovirus, which was used in thousands of people for the Ebola vaccine. So it's essentially we're using the same thing. That's where we had so much confidence, even in April, early on the safety, because this was an established technology and thing going into your body. It's not something new that we reinvented. It's not a new protein or a new messenger RNA or a new anything. It is something that is already established, was used in the Ebola vaccine by Oxford, and then we used it for this, and again did another safety for it again. So that's why we were very comfortable on it.
That's the reason why you took the risk and chose Oxford, which is my question at this time.
So early, yes, exactly. That was a major factor why we chose that, because we felt very comfortable early on the safety.
Right. Question from Kapil Bhushan, who wants to know, distribution would be a challenge. What are your suggestions in terms of making sure it reaches the last mile? I know it's not your job, but what could you suggest?
I think as many private players that could be involved and brought in to partner with the government, and their distribution network will certainly help. We need to see more of that, which I think is slowly happening. We need to train more professionals to be able to inject the vaccine, because don't forget, if we're talking about reaching eventually after April, the rest of the population, we can't expect everyone to come even from the villages into the cities. We want to be able to, because that will create more congestion, more higher challenges on social distancing and so many other things, public transport, all of that. You don't want to increase infection and disease whilst it's still there, just because you're trying to get people in centralized areas. So you want to be able to train people to have mechanisms and locations and cold storage in as many places outside of the city limits as you can, so that you can reach more people and not cause more infection and congestion than required, just because you don't want to have a place where you've got 1,000 people, thousands of people gathering together for the vaccine, because that's not good for anyone. So these are the kind of things that the government, which I'm sure is planning, would have to look at so that we have a smooth logistical rollout and all of that.
Growing population and increasing mobility, pandemics are going to be back. So how can the vaccine industry prepare for future pandemics? How would you prepare?
I think, instead of reinventing the wheel every time with a new technology to deal with a disease, the way that Oxford did it and others have done it, rely on proven technology platforms, both, and I'll tell you what the advantages with that is. Scaling up and manufacturing, you already know how to do that. So that's a big plus. You don't have to waste months figuring that part out, which is also a challenge, let me tell you. And partly that's why, the Oxford candidate was very easy for us to scale up. It was a known technology on cells and things that we were familiar with doing. The second advantage, of course, is safety. If you establish, I'll give you a simple example on this chimp adenovirus, on safety, the next spike protein that we could use on this, like we did with Ebola or Oxford did with Ebola, makes it so much easier from the safety profile and concerns from regulators and the public to go forward. So that's what I would advise, stick to what you know. And in a pandemic, you always have, simplicity is the key. If you're talking about finding new devices and ways and technology, you're always going to run into challenges for storage, for manufacturing, for safety, regulation, all of that. So you want to be as simple and traditional as possible so that your time to respond rapidly in a pandemic is reduced as much as possible. That's the lesson I've learned, at least, and I think everybody is seeing that now going forward, so we'll be better prepared for the future.
Is that the reason why the messenger RNA vaccines are far more expensive, because they're more difficult to produce? Because I believe development is much faster. Because you can't say we can't experiment with new things because we know how to do it the old way. Because you have to come up with new technology and use it to develop vaccines. So
I think they're probably cheaper to produce, but I really don't want to comment on it without looking at the process. Generally, as a rule of thumb, after you reach a few 100 million doses, the economies of scale completely supersede the technology variant. So, if you make a few 100 million doses of a vaccine, it won't really matter whether you do it on this platform or another. It's when you're looking at 20, 30 million doses, 50 million doses, that kind of scale. That's when the technology will play a role in your costing. The messenger RNA vaccines are just expensive because the big pharma have higher costs and they've chosen to keep the pricing high as they do normally for most products. That's how it is.
Word.
Sorry?
I said use the word, it's profiteering.
Well, I don't know. That's too strong a word. I think, of course, profits are always good because you need that. Of course, profiteering is bad. And I don't think the big pharma are trying to profiteer at this stage, and I hope not at least. I think initially, before they also know their costing, they've given a price. I'm sure that as the volumes pick up, they also will come down on their price because nobody wants to be profiteering or at least even be seen profiteering during a pandemic.
So are we on track to vaccinate every Indian by the end of 2021? That's another question we've got.
I think that's impossible because, as I had said earlier, it'll probably take 2 or 3 years before every Indian gets it. Not just because of the supply constraint of the vaccine, it's also having, you need 5 things. You need the budget, you need the vaccine, you need the logistical infrastructure, you need the people willing to take the vaccine. So these are all the factors that lead up to being able to vaccinate more than 80-90% of our population. Imagine that you have in the US and Europe, and I've always seen this as a general rule of thumb, that in the West, if you are generally questioning every fact that is thrown at you instead of accepting the science or what the government tells you to do, you will have issues in a situation like this, and we can't afford to do that in a pandemic. We need to protect everyone as soon as possible. So these will be the factors why India and other nations, not just India, will take 2 to 3 years, as I stand by my statement I made a few months ago, that it'll be 2024 till everybody, if willing to take a 2-dose vaccine, will get vaccinated and protected by then.
Most people in India are accepting of vaccines. We don't have vaccine denialism, at the same level as the United States.
You'll be surprised in certain communities and other parts of India, you have a lot of resistance only because of lack of knowledge. If you have fear because you don't know everything about something, naturally it's only natural, and I don't blame them for being fearful. So it's our job, it's the media's job, it's the government's job, the manufacturer's job to explain, using social media and other means, whatever other means, to communicate the real facts on the ground, share with full transparency the information so that people know about safety and the merits of taking a vaccine as opposed to not taking it and then just being vulnerable with their families to getting a disease. So it's our job to continuously educate them because there's so much fake news, there's so much other news coming. There all these WhatsApp forwards come from the West. One guy gives it to 20 people here and then thousands of people read it and then they get scared and someone twists the words and you know how things get carried away. So we need to really keep an eye on it and continuously message and give the facts on the ground to people so that they're not fearful of and understand what's going on. And then I'm sure, we all will come to the same conclusion that taking the vaccine is far better than not taking it.
How are the Novavax trials going? Are results expected soon?
Absolutely. In fact, even in December, so that's coming in also at a good time. Scaling up that product will take a little bit longer because, the facility that we designed for it was ready, I think, about 3 months after. So we'll probably be, as I said, 4 months behind the AstraZeneca product with Novavax.
By Christmas, we said? Christmas, New Year?
months behind. So as I said, if we're saying January for Oxford AstraZeneca, we're saying another 4 months for the Novavax to hit. Yeah, the trial results should be there by December, yes.
And I was thinking we can look forward to a happy new year after a very, very dismal 2020.
No, absolutely. Yeah.
So some reason to party with a mask at home again. But I have a question from Jahnavi Malhotra, who says, do you plan on increasing your production capacity once this pandemic is over, so as to be better prepared in case of a new pandemic? Could you just explain the whole, vaccine production process?
So when I took over, to give you some background, in 2011 as CEO, the first thing I did was to double our capacity for existing vaccines, because not only did I want to build redundancy in case things went wrong, but I also wanted to, and I knew that the demand would keep growing, but I wanted to prepare for a pandemic level event ever since I heard Bill Gates in a TED talk, where he clearly said that we should probably be more worried and spend more money and funds, whether it's governments or others, on building this kind of capability and capacity than even nuclear or other things, or even space programs where we spend billions, hundreds of billions of dollars as a global community every year. So that got me thinking, and in fact, ironically, a year ago, I started to commission and build the world's largest pandemic facility with a capex of around 3,000 crores to produce more than 1 billion doses. So that's going to be functional in about 2 years. So that'll add another 1 billion dose capacity to what we've already rejigged right now. And that's a multi-product facility which can handle any pathogen, bacteria, virus, everything, proteins, messenger RNA as well, once and for all. So, we will have a multi-product pandemic level facility to handle 1 billion doses of bulk and fill finish in about 2 years from now. And I started doing that about a year and a half ago. So that was my thinking. That's what, we've been doing for the last few years. And that's really coming in handy. And, we may even expand on that going forward.
Hopefully what you're saying is in probably another 2 years we'll be producing 80 to 90% of the world's vaccines. Or we'll at least have the capacity to do so.
I don't think so. Because I don't think so, because I think all the other Indian and Chinese vaccine manufacturers are also going to scale up now, and you're going to see a lot of other vaccine manufacturers coming up across the globe, because everyone's now realized that this very niche and small underrated industry is not only essential, but also quite profitable, if you're able to make large scale good technology, good production, and a lot of pharmaceutical companies also in India, which were never making vaccines, I think Zydus and Aurobindo and others, are also seriously looking at making vaccines. So, the demand is also growing, but you'll see a lot of new players also coming in into the fray.
Let's start. So, who is your closest competitor? Which other country? Would it be China? Would it be Malaysia?
Well, we have all global competitors, you've got excellent companies. Sorry, I can't hear you very well.
In terms of volume? In terms of vaccine volume?
Oh, you've got Indian vaccine manufacturers also who can make hundreds of millions of doses, like Biological Evans, Bharat Biotech, Panisha Biotech. You've got the Chinese and South Koreans who are also scaling up a lot and will be able to make hundreds of millions of doses. And of course, you've got your Western companies, Sanofi, GSK, Pfizer, Johnson & Johnson. So, there are about 10 to 15 serious players in this field globally.
I'm asking some very rapid questions because I'm getting loads of questions for you. I have a question from Aishwarya Anita Arapal, who says, is there a chance that the virus will mutate to a more aggressive strain after the vaccine and is developed and is getting ready to be distributed? If so, what would be the next step that we would be looking at? So if you have a more virulent virus, will the vaccine still work? That's the question.
Well, it depends how much it will mutate. If it changes a lot, then of course the existing vaccines may not be very effective against it. So far, there's no signs of the virus mutating. of course, that'll really be bad news for everybody, because all this effort and euphoria and excitement will have been wasted and been for nothing. Well, not for nothing, we've learned a lot, but of course, yes, to a certain extent, hypothetically, if the virus mutated significantly, we'd all have to go back to the drawing board to make a new vaccine. And, obviously that's going to be very bad. But at the moment, that doesn't seem to be happening. And, we're not seeing a lot of signs for that. So that's good news.
I have a question how long is the immunity from the vaccine likely to last? And she also wants to know whether the manufacturing of the COVID vaccine affects the production of vaccines which we use for routine immunization. Because again, we produce a lot of those vaccines.
Of course. So that was a very important question and challenge, where we had to ensure that all the other vaccines that we're making for babies and infants continue, and there's no shortage on that. And the other question, of course, the earlier part of the question was, how long will the immunity last? Nobody knows, as I said early on. Only time will tell, but the early signs are that the T-cell response is looking good, which is an indicator to provide long-term immunity. But we'll have to wait 6 more months at least to be able to judge and then comment how long these vaccines will protect us.
I have a question from Harsh Rai, who wants to know that, keeping in mind we have an existing flu shot.
Interference, I can't hear you very well.
I have a question from Harsh Rai, who's saying that, keeping in mind the existing flu shot, will people need the COVID vaccine and the flu shot together once the COVID vaccine hits the market? Because he says, do you need double protection?
Well, of course, as you know, the flu vaccine is for something totally different, and you should take that as well. Probably keep a few weeks gap between vaccines. That's always sensible. And there's no harm in taking the flu vaccine and, of course, the COVID vaccine as well. I highly recommend that you take both.
So I have a personal question, because your dad set up the Serum Institute way back in 1966. And now you're supplying to 170 countries, and these are life-saving vaccines. Some estimates say they've helped save 20 million lives. So what does he feel about the role Serum Institute is playing now in such a pivotal role in fighting a pandemic?
Well, he's just so happy and excited that in his lifetime, when he started this company, never did he ever imagine it would grow to this level as a global vaccine player. He was only trying to address this huge shortage of vaccines that existed back in the day in India, and we were dependent on imports, and he wanted to address that issue. So certainly to see this happen in his lifetime is the best reward that he could have ever imagined for all his hard work, blood and sweat that he went through. And he really struggled, because in those days, getting permissions, getting access to funding, getting good talent, those were the challenges that he really had to grapple with, which is of course there even today, but nowhere close to the extent of what he went through. So this is the ultimate, I guess, reward that he can see, that we've come so close to this stage, and he's so happy that this company that he started with $10,000 capital in those days has come to where we are today.
So since you took over as CEO, do you see the difference? Do you see that? Is it easier for you to talk to people, and do they take you more seriously when you talk about how vaccines can save lives? Is it easier to find buyers? How has it changed since you've taken over?
Well, it's changed dramatically in the sense that, when I joined in 2001, just to talk about the last 20 years that I've been in this business, getting permissions, launching new products and vaccines was so difficult and bureaucratic that took years and years to do. We didn't really have that much of a global reputation at that time also, to cite another challenge. So going to other countries to expand was very difficult. They didn't know what this company was. They never heard of it. So, that of course changed in the last 20 years, and then rapidly, of course, even more than that in the last 10 years, as we kept growing and building a brand. So, those were the challenges that I saw. And of course, that attracted better talent as well. when you're better known, you're seen to be a leader and a global player, you attract talent. And, that also helped us grow because we need so many people. Now we've got 7,000 employees. That's doubled in the last, I would say, 6 to 7 years. So we've been growing exponentially in the last 5 to 7 years as a result of all these things that have been happening over the last 5 decades.
Do we have enough talent in India, or is it difficult to find the right people? Because it's such a niche.
No, I think, and we have a very good way to train also talent that has got some experience. So it's a combination of ready-made talent that, yes, there is there in India. And a lot of people, don't forget, of now moving back to India as well because of the opportunities and growth that they're seeing over here. So that's also a good thing that's been happening in the last 5 years that we've seen. And it's always hard for a complete foreigner to relocate to India and live here for a long period of time. We always have had the ethos that when you join Serum, you're there for life. We've got people working for 30, 40 years in Serum. And so we create that culture and we train them. So even if they come from a pharmaceutical company, we train them in our area and expertise and field, because that's the only way to build further talent and grow. Otherwise, it's not possible to depend on recruiting globally to live in India and manufacture in India.
One of the key things that's emerged from this whole pandemic is how private players are working very, very closely, not just with scientists, which you've always done, but also with governments, like your trial in India is with ICMR. So do you see that to be the way ahead when it comes to future development, or is it just because of the pandemic that we have that sense of urgency on part of the government as well?
ICMR, DBT and other departments and the government, because it's always good to do things at scale together with the government. You don't necessarily have to always choose that path. Sometimes it makes sense because they have a lot of infrastructure and scientific guidance and knowledge that they can also contribute to. So it's a nice way to have public-private partnerships. It's worked out generally quite well. And also it helps to further progress in the regulatory front, because then you're kind of aligned all together, doing something together. So it's always been a plus. And yes, we do look at doing more things like that in the future as well.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
And thanks for joining us.
Pleasure being with you. All the best. Thank you.
Sanjita, thanks very much. And that was, of course, the discussion with Adar Poonawalla, the CEO of Serum Institute of India, the man who is responsible for being the largest manufacturer of the vaccine, and Serum, Adar Poonawalla, of course, giving a completely different timeline over there and giving us some idea of what the price of the vaccine is going to be as well. So fascinating discussion there. So on day one of the 18th edition of the summit, we've had 2 special COVID sessions. We've had, of course, the 2 doctors and Adar Poonawalla as well. That gives us a sense of what we can look forward to on day 2. Remember, it starts again at 6 o'clock, and we'll have 2, again, big newsmakers on the session. We'll have Kapil Dev, cricketing legend, and we'll have Delhi's Chief Minister Arvind Kejriwal. In a way, that is perhaps also going to be a lot about COVID, because his state is having to deal with the 3rd wave right now. He says it's over, but is it really? So that's something to look forward to. And of course, join us then. That's it for day 1. Remember, 6 o'clock, day 2 of the HT Summit. We're going to continue all the way till December 11th. So see you again tomorrow.
A vision becomes a milestone when it helps make a cleaner, smarter, and a more beautiful planet, so that you can set off on joyous new journeys and adventures. Building stronger bonds and bridging impossible distances, which take you from the ever new to the forever beautiful. Opening up vistas and windows to a vibrant new world. A vision becomes a milestone when it touches millions of lives. Aditya Birla Group. Big in your life.
Thank you, Sonal. Amme, this Sonal. Thank you, Sonal.
Thank you, Sonal. Why is everyone thanking me?
I'll tell you. When you buy an Usha sewing machine, more than 1% of the proceeds go towards empowering women in rural India through Usha Silai schools. That's why.
You have 10 minutes or I'm gone.
I'll take a lot less.
Send in the drones.
Show maps.
It seems like everybody wants you.
I'm Born Magnetic. The all-new i20. Born Magnetic.
Life is about to change, eh? No more 8 घंटे की नींद, no more late night movies, no more parties with friends.
बिल्कुल सही कहा तुमने. इसके फ्यूचर के लिए अब no more holidays, no more shopping और no more फिजूल का खर्च.
लेकिन अगर इसका फ्यूचर ऑलरेडी सिक्योर्ड हो तो?
Really?
डैडी बने हो, देवदास नहीं. जीना छोड़ दूंगा, हॉलीडेज छोड़ दूंगा.
स्मार्ट लोगों की क्लियर है प्रायोरिटी, बाकी सब बाद में. क्यूट वाले मेहमान से पहले LIC.
Luxury. In India, I discovered that true luxury isn't something you buy off a shelf. True luxury is a feeling that you are the Maharani of your world, and it can be all designed around you. All the beauty is yours. All the music is yours. India showed me that luxury doesn't follow designers and brands. True luxury follows its own heart.
Incredible India.
It's a human thing to want the truth. It doesn't matter if you're older or part of the youth. We certainly don't like being kept in the dark between all those lies and those question marks. But lately, it doesn't seem to bother us when they bend and break and twist and crush. The truth, that's supposed to matter so much. In the race to be the first who breaks the news, they seem to have broken the news. And do you even remember the time when the news was supposed to make you wise? And now you can spend hours consuming and listening them shouting and complaining. And in the end, just feeling worse off than you did in the beginning. Which begs the question, does all of this not trouble our generation? When they push opinions and call them facts as we watch the fourth pillar crumble and collapse. It is a human thing to want the truth and to make every claim carry its burden of proof. To expect that the first voice you hear is also the last word that's there.
Meet the all-new Hindustan Times. Now experience, engage and express. Hindustan Times. First voice, last word.